I am Liam. I'm 32 years old, and my own father disowned me at the Thanksgiving dinner table for telling the truth. Before I tell you about the chaos that followed, the police, the repossessed car, and the frantic phone calls that changed all of our lives forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this. The air in my parents' dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Not just with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon from the pumpkin pie, but with a tension that had been simmering for years. It clung to the floral wallpaper and settled in the silence between the forced pleasantries. On the surface, it was a perfect picture of a Midwest American Thanksgiving. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the table, carving the bird with a sense of ceremony that never matched his mood. My mother, Helen, fluttered around, refilling glasses and offering plastic smiles. And my brother, Leo, the golden child, was holding court, his hands waving animatedly as he described his latest vision. I just wanted a peaceful dinner. That's all I'd been hoping for. But peace was a luxury our family couldn't afford. It had been that way for as long as I could remember. So, the app uses AI to create personalized fitness routines, Leo announced, his chest puffed out. It's revolutionary. We're talking game changer. My mother beamed at him. Oh, Leo, that sounds wonderful. You're always so full of brilliant ideas. Just need to secure the next round of funding, he said, pointedly not looking at me. But with an idea this solid, it's just a matter of time. I knew what that meant. Funding was code for my wallet. I took a slow sip of water, the condensation on the glass cold against my fingers. I'd spent 8 years funding their lives, 8 years of my 6-figure tech salary pouring into this house, paying the mortgage, the utilities, the car payments. I decided to tread carefully. The fitness app market is pretty saturated, Leo, I said. My tone as neutral as I could make it. What's your unique value proposition? The smile vanished from my mother's face. There he goes again, she sighed, placing a dish of mashed potatoes on the table with a clatter. Always raining on your brother's parade. My father put down the carving knife. The boy has vision, Liam. Something you wouldn't understand. You just sit behind a desk all day. The injustice of it all, the years of silent sacrifice, boiled up inside me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. A desk that pays the mortgage on this house, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. A desk that has paid for every one of Leo's failed businesses for the last 8 years. The room went silent. Leo's jaw dropped. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. But it was my father's reaction that stopped my heart. His face turned a dark, blotchy red. A vein pulsed in his forehead. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Get out! He roared, his voice cracking with rage. Paying our bills doesn't make you family. How dare you throw your help in our faces? My mother rushed to his side, her voice a venomous whisper in my ear. You're just jealous of your brother's potential. You always have been. Something inside me snapped. The years of resentment, of feeling invisible, finally gave way to a cold, hard clarity. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's disappointed sneer, to my brother's smug smirk, and I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had finally run out of hope. You're right, I said calmly, placing my napkin on the table. Then let his potential pay the $9,600 a month it takes to keep this all going. I stood up and walked towards the door, their stunned silence following me. You leave this table, my father choked out behind me, and don't you bother coming back for Christmas. You are no longer my son. I didn't turn around. I just walked out into the cold November night. As I sat in my car, the engine quiet, the screen of my phone lit up my face. The shock began to fade, replaced by a chilling resolve. They had finally said the quiet part out loud. Paying their bills didn't make me family. So I wouldn't. The first memory that surfaced wasn't of the fight, but of something from decades ago. A gleaming red bicycle. A symbol of where it all began. That red bicycle. It was a Schwinn, I think. Bright, candy apple red with chrome fenders that shone like mirrors. Leo got it for his 10th birthday. I remember because my 12th birthday had been 2 months earlier. Leo had brought home a report card with 3 C's, A, D, and AB in gym. He'd gotten the bike. 2 months prior, I'd brought home a report card with straight A's, a letter of commendation from my science teacher, and 1 second place in the state math competition. I'd gotten a pat on the head and a quiet, "That's nice, Liam." Even as a kid, you understand currency. Not just money, but the currency of love, of attention, of approval. In our house, all the currency flowed to Leo. He was the charming one, the funny one, the one with potential. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who just existed. I got the smaller bedroom with the leaky window. Leo got the big one overlooking the backyard. He got new clothes every school year. I got his hand-me-downs if they weren't too worn out. I learned early on that the only way to get any sort of peace was to excel, to be so self-sufficient that I never needed anything from them. It was a lonely way to grow up. I poured myself into my schoolwork, into computers. The logical, predictable world of code made sense to me in a way my own family never did. 1 + 1 always equaled 2. Do the work, get the result. In my family, the math was always skewed. I could bring home a trophy and Leo could break a neighbor's window, and somehow, I was the one who ended up feeling like I needed to apologize for taking up too much space. My parents weren't monsters. I want to be clear about that. They were just blind. Blind to the dynamic they had created. My mother saw Leo as an extension of her own unfulfilled dreams. She'd wanted to be an artist, and she saw his creativity, even when it led to nothing but messes, as a sign of genius. My father, a man who worked a union job at an auto plant, saw Leo's effortless charm as the key to a white-collar success he'd never had. I, with my quiet diligence and predictable success, was just background noise. The reliable, sturdy furniture of the family. You don't praise a chair for holding you up. You just expect it to. That was me. The chair. I accepted it. For years, I accepted it as my role. The invisible yet reliable son. I told myself it was fine. That one day they would see me. One day my achievements would be too big to ignore. That hope, I would later learn, was the most dangerous thing of all. It kept me tethered to them long after I should have walked away. The scars from that childhood weren't the visible kind. They were the deep, internal kind that whisper to you in the dead of night, telling you that you aren't enough, that your worth is conditional, and that you have to earn the love that should be given freely. And that red bicycle was the first gleaming symbol of that painful truth. The apathetic family dynamic solidified into a financial nightmare the year I turned 18. That was the year the auto plant had massive layoffs. My father, with 25 years on the line, was suddenly out of a job. His pride, already a fragile thing, was shattered. He never really recovered. He took odd jobs here and there, but the steady provider he once was disappeared, replaced by a bitter, resentful man who spent his days watching daytime TV. My mother's part-time job as a dental receptionist wasn't nearly enough to keep them afloat. That same year, I was accepted into a top engineering program. There was no talk of a college fund for me. It was just understood that I was on my own. So I did what I had to do. I worked 3 jobs while carrying a full course load. I was a barista at 5 a.m., a library assistant in the afternoon, and a pizza delivery guy on weekends. I survived on cheap noodles and caffeine, my eyes constantly burning from exhaustion. Sleep was a concept, not a reality. Meanwhile, Leo was graduating high school. His grades were abysmal, but he'd decided he wanted to go to a private business school, one with a hefty price tag. I watched in disbelief as my parents, who constantly complained about being broke, took out a second mortgage on their house to pay for his tuition. An investment in his future. My father had called it, his eyes avoiding mine. I didn't say a word. I just went back to my dorm room, ate a packet of ramen, and studied until my vision blurred. The message was clear. My future was my problem. His was their priority. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. I had multiple job offers before I even had my diploma in hand. By the age of 24, I was living in Detroit, working as a software developer for a major fintech company, and earning a six-figure salary. The relief was immense. For the first time in my life, I felt secure. I could breathe. That's when the phone calls started. At first, it was subtle. "Oh, Liam, the water heater broke. I don't know how we're going to manage." My mother would sigh into the phone. I'd send them $1,000. Then it was, "Your father's car needs new tires, but we just can't swing it this month." I pay the bill. What started as occasional assistance for emergencies quickly became a regular expectation. Within a year, the ad hoc requests had morphed into a structured, unspoken agreement. I was paying their $800 monthly mortgage payment. I was covering the $400 in utilities. I took over the $600 payments on their 2 cars. It was easier to just set up automatic payments than to have the same stressful conversation every month. They never asked directly for me to take over everything. It just happened. A leaky pipe of need that I kept plugging with my money, until I realized I wasn't plugging a leak. I was the entire water supply, and they had no intention of ever turning off the tap. My best friend, Mark, saw it all happening. We'd been friends since college, roommates who had survived on a shared budget of practically zero. He knew my history, and he saw the pattern repeating itself just with bigger numbers. "Dude, they're taking advantage of you," he told me one night over beers. We were at my apartment, a nice place downtown I was proud of but rarely had time to enjoy. "This isn't helping them. It's enabling them." I'd just gotten off the phone with my mother, who had called to tell me about a plumbing issue that would cost $500 to fix. I'd already transferred the money. "It's just until my dad gets back on his feet," I mumbled, though even I didn't believe it anymore. My dad hadn't seriously looked for a job in years. Mark pointed to a glass jar on my counter where I kept loose change. "What do you call that?" "My emergency fund jar," I said. "No," he corrected me, his eyes serious. "That's your guilt jar. Every time you feel guilty for having a life they don't, you throw money at them. You'd be better off spending that money on therapy, Liam." Seriously. He was right, of course. But hearing it and accepting it are two different things. I was trapped in a cycle of hope and obligation. I thought that if I just gave enough, was successful enough, was good enough, one day they would finally turn to me and say, "Thank you, son. We see you. We're proud of you." It was a fantasy, a carrot I dangled in front of myself to justify the sacrifice. The examples of their ingratitude were relentless, little paper cuts that slowly bled me dry. For my mother's 60th birthday, I spent $2,000 on a weekend trip to Chicago for the 3 of us. I booked a suite at a beautiful hotel, got tickets to a Broadway show, made reservations at her favorite kind of restaurant. When we got back, my aunt asked her how it was. "Oh, we had a nice time," she said dismissively, before launching into a 5-minute story about the thoughtful handmade card Leo had given her. The $2,000, the planning, the time off work, all of it erased by a piece of construction paper with glitter glue. A few years later, my father needed knee surgery. It was a major operation with a long recovery. I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave from my job to go back home and take care of him. I cooked, I cleaned, I drove him to physical therapy. I helped him in and out of the shower. It was exhausting. All he did was complain. "The soup is too salty. You're driving too fast." One afternoon, he looked at me with pure annoyance and said, "Jason would have done this better. He knows how I like things." The final straw before the Thanksgiving disaster was when they asked me for $12,000. Leo's latest brilliant idea, a subscription box service for artisanal dog toys, had collapsed after 3 months, leaving him with a mountain of debt to local investors. "It's a family crisis, Liam," my mother had said, her voice trembling with manufactured panic. "We have to help him." For the first time, I said no. I couldn't do it. My own savings were taking a hit, and I was trying to plan for my own future. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Cold shoulders. Guilt trips about family loyalty. My father stopped taking my calls altogether. The message was clear. My value was directly tied to my willingness to fund my brother's failures. I ignored Mark's warnings. I ignored the evidence in front of my own eyes, all because I was still chasing that pat on the head from a decade ago. And that desperation is what led me right to their dining room table, ready for the slaughter. My brother Leo lived his life like a perpetual motion machine powered by bad ideas. It was almost impressive in a way. He didn't just fail. He failed spectacularly, leaving a trail of debt and broken promises in his wake. Yet he always emerged from the wreckage with his self-confidence completely intact. It was a superpower I could never understand. His first major venture, after dropping out of the expensive business school my parents mortgaged their house for, was an online dropshipping business selling. I think it was bamboo phone cases. He spent 6 months building a flashy website, convinced he was the next Jeff Bezos. The business lasted until his first credit card statement arrived. He'd spent thousands on online advertising with a return of about $75. When I tried to offer some advice on targeted marketing, he waved me off. "You don't get the startup grind, Liam. You're corporate." The business folded. My parents called it a valuable learning experience. Next came the food truck. This was his passion project for a solid year. He talked endlessly about gourmet fusion tacos. He created menus. He designed a logo. He even bought a ridiculous chef's hat. The only thing he never managed to acquire was an actual truck. The startup costs were too high, he claimed. That venture died not with a bang, but with a whimper, and a drawer full of unused napkins with his taco logo on them. Then came the crypto phase. This one was the most damaging. He'd watched a bunch of YouTube videos and suddenly declared himself a cryptocurrency investment guru. He convinced my parents that he was on the verge of making millions. I later found out he'd lost over $15,000 of their savings, and apparently a lot more that I didn't know about at the time, on a coin that plummeted to zero overnight. When I confronted them about it, my mother defended him fiercely. "You have to take risks to get rewards, Liam. Jason has such vision." My stable career, the one that was quietly keeping a roof over their heads, was never described as having vision. It was just a utility like the electricity or the water. The artisanal dog toy subscription box was the grand finale. It was the business they had asked me for $12,000 to bail out. When I refused, they somehow cobbled together the money from their dwindling retirement savings to pay off the angriest of his suppliers. Through it all, my parents' faith in him never wavered. Every failure was reframed as a near success. Every bad decision was a sign of his daring and creativity. They spoke about his potential as if it were a tangible asset, a commodity more valuable than my actual proven success. They rarely, if ever, mentioned my job, my promotion at work, or the fact that my steady, boring career was the only thing keeping their entire world from collapsing. My success was their safety net, but Leo was their lottery ticket. And they were addicted to the fantasy of him winning, no matter how many times he lost. This blind devotion, this complete disconnect from reality, was the fuel for the fire that was about to consume us all. The week before Thanksgiving, I got the news I'd been working towards for years. I'd successfully led a massive, high-stakes project at my firm, and my boss had called me into his office to tell me that my year-end bonus was going to be substantial. More than that, he'd hinted at a major promotion coming after the new year. For the first time in a long time, I felt a pure, uncomplicated sense of pride. I had earned this. That evening, my mother called. Her voice was sweeter than honey. "Liam, honey, I was just thinking. You have that beautiful big apartment and that lovely kitchen. Why don't you host Thanksgiving this year? It would be such a treat for your father and me not to have to do all the work." I was suspicious. They hadn't set foot in my apartment in over a year. But the good news from work had made me feel generous. Maybe this was their way of extending an olive branch after the cold shoulder treatment over the dog toy business. "Sure, Mom," I said. "I can do that." "Oh, wonderful," she gushed. "It will be so cozy. Just the four of us. A real family dinner. And it will be a great chance for you and Leo to really talk. He's got this new app idea, it's just brilliant. He'd love to tell you all about it." And there it was. The hook. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about giving her a break. It was a business pitch. They wanted to corner me on my own turf, in the spirit of holiday generosity, and pressure me into funding Leo's next failure. The realization was like a splash of cold water. I kept my voice even. Yeah, we can talk about it, but Mom, I have to be honest, my finances are a little tight right now with the holidays coming up. It was a lie, but a necessary one. I needed to set a boundary. The warmth in her voice instantly evaporated. Oh, she said, her tone suddenly clipped. Well, okay. I'll talk to your father and call you back. She called back an hour later. Change of plans, she announced briskly. Your father feels it's just better if we have it here. Tradition, you know, so just bring a side dish. See you at 3 on Thursday. And she hung up. The bait and switch was so blatant it was almost insulting. They had tried to set a trap. When I didn't walk into it, they retreated to their own territory where they had control, demoting me from host to a mere guest expected to bring a contribution. A part of me, the smart part, wanted to call back and say I wasn't coming. But another, older part of me, the 12-year-old boy still desperate for approval, couldn't do it. I still held on to that tiny, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. So I went to the store. I spent $400 on the best ingredients for gourmet green bean casserole and a ridiculously expensive pumpkin cheesecake. I would show up, I would be the good son, and I would endure whatever came next. It was a decision that would change the course of my life. I walked into my parents' house on Thanksgiving Day with a cheesecake in one hand and a heavy sense of dread in the other. The smell of turkey was welcoming, but the atmosphere was anything but. My mother gave me a brief, tight-lipped hug. My father grunted a hello from his armchair in front of the blaring TV. The expensive wine I brought was placed on the counter without a word. Leo, however, was all smiles. He was practically vibrating with excitement, ready to pitch his masterpiece. Dinner was served, and the performance began. It's not just a fitness app, Leo explained, gesturing with a bread roll. It's a lifestyle revolution. We're talking celebrity endorsements, brand partnerships. The potential is limitless. It sounds amazing, sweetie, my mother cooed. You have your grandfather's entrepreneurial spirit. My grandfather had owned a small, successful hardware store. Comparing him to Leo was an insult to his memory. My father nodded gravely. This is the one, son. I can feel it. This is your big break. They were talking about investing their retirement savings into it. The same savings that had already been decimated by Leo's crypto disaster. I felt a surge of panic, not for me, but for them. They were going to lose everything. I tried to be gentle, to frame it as professional advice from someone who had spent nearly a decade in the tech industry. The market is incredibly competitive, though, I started. User acquisition costs are sky high. You'd need a multimillion-dollar marketing budget just to get noticed. Do you have a plan for that? My mother slammed the gravy boat down on the table. Liam, please, can you not do this today? Can you not tear him down for one day? I'm not tearing him down, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm asking legitimate business questions. This is my field. I know what I'm talking about. Oh, of course, she sneered. Mr. Big Shot from the city, coming here to tell us all how it is. You think because you make a good salary you're better than us? That's when the dam broke. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing my frustration, of paying and paying and paying for nothing in return. It all came rushing out. Better than you? No. But more responsible? Yes. I shot back, my voice rising. I know what I'm talking about because my boring job has been paying the mortgage on this house for 8 years. Paid for the car you drove here in, Mom. It paid for the electricity that cooked this turkey. It paid for every single one of his failed visions. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the first time the unspoken truth had ever been said aloud at that table. My father's face, which had been slowly darkening, was now a mask of pure fury. He rose from his chair, a towering figure of wounded pride, and delivered the words that would set me free. Get out, he roared. And the final fracture, the one that had been spreading for years, finally broke our family apart. The moment the words left my mouth, I couldn't take them back, and I didn't want to. For nearly a decade, our family had operated under a fragile, unspoken contract. They would pretend they were self-sufficient, and I would pretend I was just helping out. They would lavish praise on Leo's imaginary successes, and I would quietly pay for his very real failures. We all played our parts in this sad, dysfunctional play. But I had just thrown the script into the fire. I looked at their faces. Leo looked like I had slapped him. My mother's expression was a mixture of shock and outrage, as if I had uttered the most profane blasphemy imaginable. My father looked utterly betrayed. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right, and I had dared to say it. I had exposed the lie that held his fragile ego together. All these years, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and grief. All these years, I worked my ass off, not just for me, for you, for this family. When Dad lost his job, who stepped up? When Leo needed tuition, who was told to figure it out on his own so you could mortgage this house for him? Who pays for the emergencies? Who pays for the day-to-day? It was me. My mother found her voice first. We never asked you for any of it, she hissed, a blatant lie. You didn't have to ask, I exclaimed, my voice getting louder. You just sigh into the phone about a bill you couldn't pay, and you knew I'd take care of it. You manipulated me with guilt, and I let you. I turned to Leo. And you just took it. You let me pay for your life while you chased one fantasy after another, and you never once said thank you. You just thought you were entitled to it. Leo shrank back in his chair, unable to meet my eyes. He had no defense because there was none. We all knew it was the truth. The air crackled with it. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet, accommodating son. I was a creditor calling in a debt that wasn't financial but emotional. A debt of recognition, of gratitude, of simple respect. And from the looks on their faces, it was a debt they had no intention of ever repaying. My father's rage was just the confirmation. He couldn't face the truth, so he did the only thing he could. He decided to erase me from the equation. My father's roar of "Get out!" echoed in the sudden, ringing silence. His hand was still pointing at the door, trembling. His entire body shook with a fury that seemed to come from a place deeper than just anger. It was the fury of a king whose authority had been challenged, of a man whose carefully constructed world had just been shattered by a single, undeniable truth. "Robert, please," my mother whispered, putting a hand on his arm, but he shook her off. His eyes, burning with a mix of shame and rage, were locked on me. "You ungrateful brat," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything we've done for you, raising you, putting a roof over your head, you dare to come into my house and throw money in my face? Your house." I repeated, the absurdity of the statement giving me a strange sense of calm. "Dad, the bank owns this house, and I pay the bank." That was it. That was the final insult his pride could not endure. "Paying our bills doesn't make you family," he bellowed, slamming his hand on the table. The dishes jumped, and my mother let out a small shriek. "It makes you a landlord, and I am kicking you out. I am done with you." My mother, seeing her dream of Leo's app funding evaporate before her eyes, chimed in with her own special brand of poison. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than my father's shouting. "You're just jealous of your brother's potential," she said, her eyes cold and hard. "You always have been. You have this stable, boring life, and he dares to dream and you can't stand it. You want him to fail." I looked at them, really looked at them. The father I had once revered, now a broken man hiding behind rage. The mother I had always tried to please, now a stranger whose love was clearly conditional. And my brother, the source of it all, sitting silently, letting them fight his battles for him. And in that moment, the hurt, the anger, the years of longing for their approval, it all just vanished. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. All that was left was a profound, empty sadness, and a startling clarity. I let out a short, humorless laugh. They stared at me as if I'd gone insane. I slowly picked up my coat from the back of my chair. "You know what? You're right," I said, my voice completely level. The calm in my own voice surprised me. "I'm not family. I'm a bank." I looked my father dead in the eye. "And this bank is officially closing. Then I looked at my mother. And you're right too. I am jealous. Not of Leo's potential. I'm jealous that he got parents and I got this. I turned and walked to the door. You leave this table. My father's voice, now hoarse, called after me. And don't you bother coming back for Christmas. You are no longer my son. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't look back. Don't worry, I said, pulling the door open to the cold night air. I won't. And I walked out, closing the door quietly behind me, on my entire life up to that point. The cold air hit me like a physical blow, snapping me out of the surreal haze of the dining room. I stumbled to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there in the dark, the silence of the car a stark contrast to the shouting match that was still ringing in my ears. My heart was hammering against my ribs. No longer my son. The words echoed in my head. I should have felt devastated. I should have been crying. But I just felt numb. A deep, cold, hollow numbness. For my entire life, I had contorted myself into knots trying to win their approval, and in the span of 5 minutes, it had all been burned to the ground. My hand automatically reached for my phone. I dialed Mark. He answered on the second ring. Hey man, happy Thanksgiving. How's it going with the fam? They disowned me? I cut him off, the words sounding foreign and absurd as I said them. There was a pause on the other end. What? Liam, what happened? I recounted the entire dinner conversation, my voice flat and emotionless, like I was reading a police report. The app pitch, my questions, my mother's accusations, my father's explosion, the final, banishing words. When I finished, Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Good, good. I asked, bewildered. What do you mean, good? I mean, good for you, he said, his voice firm. They finally showed you who they really are. You're free, Liam. You just don't feel it yet. So, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? The question hung in the air. For years, my life had been dictated by their needs, their emergencies, their desires. Now there was nothing. A blank slate. I told them, I said slowly, an idea taking root in the frozen landscape of my mind, that the bank was closing. Then close it, Mark said simply. Don't just say it. Do it. Tonight. Before you have a chance to second-guess yourself. Before your mother calls crying with some fake apology. Cut the cord, man. For real. His words were like a switch flipping in my brain. He was right. Couldn't be an empty threat. It had to be a promise. Promise to myself. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. Okay, I'm going to do it. I hung up, the numbness replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I pulled my laptop from my passenger seat and opened it, balancing it on my steering wheel. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark car. First, the online banking portal. I logged in. There it was, the automatic monthly payment to my father's mortgage account. My finger hovered over the cancel button for a second. This was real. This was the point of no return. I clicked it. A small pop-up asked, Are you sure? I clicked, Yes. The payment disappeared from the scheduled list. A weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. Next, the utility companies. The electric bill. Click. Cancelled. The gas bill. Click. Cancelled. The water, the internet, the cable package. Click. 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 Each click was a declaration of independence. It was methodical. Clinical. I felt a strange detachment, like a surgeon performing a necessary amputation. Then the car payments. I logged into the auto loan website. 2 vehicles. Both in my parents' names, but funded by my account. I removed my payment information and canceled the auto draft. The streaming accounts. Netflix, Hulu, Max, all under my email, my credit card. I went into the settings for each and logged out all devices. Changed the passwords. I went through my credit card statements, hunting down any recurring charges linked to their address. The home security system, the lawn service. I canceled them all. Each action was a link in a chain, and I was severing them one by one. I was dismantling the infrastructure of my own servitude. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. It was about taking back the life I had almost given away. And I still didn't know that the biggest confirmation I was doing the right thing was just one email away. I had just canceled the last subscription, a fancy coffee delivery service my mother loved, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it, assuming it was another confirmation of a canceled service. But the sender's name made me pause. James Davidson, the CEO of my company. The subject line was, "The next chapter." My heart gave a little jolt. This was unusual. A personal email from the CEO on Thanksgiving night? I opened it, my curiosity piqued. The email was brief, but the words on the screen seemed to rearrange the entire world. Subject, "The next chapter." Liam, I know it's a holiday, but I couldn't wait to share the official news. The final papers for the acquisition were signed this afternoon. As of tomorrow morning, we are officially part of the larger tech conglomerate. As we discussed, this marks a new beginning for all of us. I've attached the finalized documents regarding your new role as Vice President of Engineering for the Integrated Division. Your official promotion is effective immediately. Most importantly, I've also attached the initial valuation report. Per the terms of your senior partnership agreement, your vested stock options have now been converted. I'll let you look at the numbers yourself, but congratulations, Liam. You've more than earned it. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. Big things ahead. Best, James. My hands started to shake again, but this time for a completely different reason. I clicked on the attachment, a password-protected PDF. I typed in the code and the document opened. It was a spreadsheet full of financial jargon, but my eyes found the relevant line item instantly. Liam Morris, converted equity value. And next to it was a number with a comma and 6 zeros after it. Actually, it was well into the 7 figures. I leaned back against the headrest, the laptop feeling impossibly heavy on my lap. I stared out the windshield at the dark, familiar street where my parents' house stood. Inside that house, they were probably still fuming, congratulating themselves on kicking out their ungrateful son, the landlord. They were consoling Leo, reassuring him that his brilliant app would be their salvation. They had just disowned me. They had told me I wasn't family. They had thrown me out over a few $1,000s a month. And they had absolutely no idea that they had just severed ties with the one person who had not only been keeping them afloat, but who was now officially a millionaire. The bonus I'd been happy about earlier that week? It was nothing, a rounding error compared to this. The irony was so thick, so crushingly profound, it was almost comical. I started to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, then grew into a full-blown, tear-streaming laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just witnessed the most absurd, tragic, and liberating moment of his entire life. They hadn't disowned a son. They hadn't disowned a bank. They had disowned their winning lottery ticket because they were too busy putting all their faith in a losing one. The laughter subsided, leaving a strange, quiet peace in its wake. All the pain, all the lingering doubt about whether I had done the right thing, it all evaporated. Their decision wasn't just cruel. It was, from a purely practical standpoint, catastrophically stupid. And it was the ultimate confirmation that they never saw me. They only ever saw a resource. And because they couldn't see my true value, they had lost access to it in every sense of the word. I started the car, the engine humming to life in the quiet street. For the first time, I wasn't just driving away from their house. I was driving towards my own future. I woke up the next morning on the couch in my own apartment, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My neck was stiff, and a dull headache pulsed behind my eyes. For a disorienting moment, I thought the whole thing had been a nightmare. Then I saw my laptop on the coffee table, and it all came rushing back. The shouting, the drive home, the clicks of the mouse severing a lifetime of connections. I picked up my phone. It was a war zone. 37 missed calls. 52 text messages. The notifications were a waterfall of panic and rage. Mom, 7:15 a.m. Liam, the internet is down. I can't watch my show. What did you do? Mom, 7:30 a.m. the coffee maker isn't working. The smart plug is offline. Call me now. Dad, 8 a.m. Your mother is in a panic. Whatever childish game you're playing, it stops now. Turn everything back on. Leo, 8:05 a.m. Seriously, dude. Not cool. I need the Wi-Fi to work on my pitch deck. Mom, 8:30 a.m. Liam, respond to me. The car won't start. Did you do something to the car? I read them with a detached sense of curiosity. It was like watching a nature documentary about a pride of lions who had just discovered their hunter had vanished. They weren't sad. They weren't apologetic. They were just angry that their food source had been cut off. Then came a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message popped up. It was from a local police officer. Mr. Morris, this is Officer Schmidt. We're at your parents' residence. They've reported a potential hacking of their home systems. Could you please give us a call back to clarify a few things? I almost laughed. They had actually called the cops. They were so incapable of taking responsibility that their first assumption was a criminal act, not the logical consequence of their own actions. I was drafting a text message to the officer when another message from my mother came through. This one in all caps. 9 a.m. They're towing the car. Liam. They are towing my car out of the driveway. The neighbors are watching. Do something. I walked over to my window, which overlooked the city, not a quiet suburban street. I took a sip of my coffee. I wasn't going to do anything. A new voicemail icon appeared. This one was from my father. His voice was no longer shouting. It was cold, menacing, and filled with a legalistic fury he must have picked up from TV shows. Liam. His voice crackled. You listen to me. I just spoke to a friend of mine. This is called elder financial abuse. You have a fiduciary duty to us. We will get a lawyer. We will take you to court. You will not get away with this. Elder financial abuse. A lawyer. The audacity was breathtaking. They had thrown me out, and now they were going to sue me for respecting their decision. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was war. This is the moment everything changed, the moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You're amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 down below, it lets me know you're still with me on this journey. It truly helps more people find this story and lets me know that my experience means something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest reason I can continue to share the rest of this story. Thank you. The threats of legal action were unsettling, but I knew they were hollow. I had consulted with a lawyer buddy of my own years ago when I first started paying their bills, just to understand the potential implications. He told me that since I was giving the money voluntarily with no contract, I could stop at any time. My father's threats were just noise. The emotional manipulation, however, was a different beast. Late that afternoon, after a full day of ignoring their frantic calls, a new text from my mother came through. It was different from the others. It wasn't angry. It was terrifying. Mom, 4:30 p.m. Liam, please answer. It's your father. He's in the hospital. Chest pains. He collapsed this morning after the stress of it all. Please just call me. My blood ran cold. This was the one thing I was afraid of. What if I had pushed him too far? The guilt, that familiar, heavy cloak, settled over me. Had I caused this? My hand trembled as I hovered over her contact number. All their awfulness, all their cruelty, but he was still my dad. But then Mark's voice echoed in my head. Before your mother calls crying with some fake apology. Or, in this case, a fake medical emergency. My logical brain, the part of me that had been dormant for so long in family matters, kicked in. If he had really collapsed, she would have called an ambulance. She would have been at the hospital, not texting me all day about the car and the internet. With a sense of dread, I did something I should have done years ago. I checked the facts. I called the main switchboard of the 2 largest hospitals in their area. I'm trying to find my father, Robert Morris, I said to each operator. He was likely admitted to the ER this morning for a cardiac issue. Both operators checked. Both gave me the same answer. I'm sorry, sir. We have no patient by that name. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It was followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. She had lied. She had used the most terrifying weapon in her arsenal. My father's health, my own love for him, to try and manipulate me back into compliance. I leaned against the wall, my phone clenched in my fist. That was it. That was the last shred of familial duty I felt, and she had just severed it with a lie. Just then, my phone rang again. This time, it was my Aunt Clara, my mother's sister. I decided to answer, thinking she might be a neutral party. I was wrong. "Liam, thank God!" she cried, her voice shrill with panic. "You have to help them. You don't understand what's going on." "I think I have a pretty good idea, Aunt Clara," I said coldly. "No, you don't," she insisted. "It's not just about the bills. It's Leo. That crypto thing, he didn't just lose their savings, Liam. He took out a $50,000 loan in your father's name. They have to make a balloon payment at the end of the year. That's why they were so desperate about his new app. They're going to lose the house. For real this time." And there it was. The final, ugly, desperate truth. This wasn't just about maintaining a lifestyle. This was about staving off complete financial ruin brought on by their golden child. My support wasn't a luxury. It was the only thing plugging a hole in a sinking ship they had created. And they were willing to lie, cheat, and emotionally blackmail me to keep me bailing water. The 6 months that followed were a blur of setting boundaries and rediscovering myself. The revelation about Leo's secret loan was the final nail in the coffin of my old life. It absolved me of any lingering guilt. This wasn't a family I needed to save. It was a sinking ship I needed to escape. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not an aggressive one, but a calm, professional family law attorney. He drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to my parents, stating that I would consider any further contact to be harassment. It felt extreme, but it was necessary. The daily barrage of calls and texts stopped overnight. The silence was deafening at first, then it became peaceful. The second thing I did was take Mark's advice. I found a therapist, a woman named Dr. Evans who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic dynamics. Our weekly sessions became my sanctuary. She helped me unpack decades of emotional baggage I didn't even realize I was carrying. "You weren't their son, Liam," she told me in one session. "You were their function. Your role was to be the stable, low-maintenance provider. When you stopped performing that function and demanded to be seen as a person, the entire system collapsed, and they labeled you as the problem." It was a revelation. I wasn't the bad guy for walking away. I was just the first one to stop pretending. Dr. Evans gave me tools to deal with the guilt, to recognize manipulation, and most importantly, to start valuing myself based on my own standards, not theirs. I blocked my parents' and Leo's numbers. I also blocked the numbers of flying monkeys like Aunt Clara, who would occasionally try to get through with messages about making amends and the importance of family. With the noise silenced, I started to rebuild. I focused on my work, but differently. I declined the official VP promotion that would have kept me tied to a massive corporate structure. Instead, with the security of my stock earnings, I started laying the groundwork for my own consulting firm. I wanted to build something for myself on my own terms. I also reconnected with the parts of my family that had been pushed to the sidelines. My Uncle David, my father's estranged brother, heard what happened through the grapevine and called me. There was no judgment in his voice. "Your dad was always a proud, difficult man," he said. "I'm just sorry you were the one who had to bear the brunt of it. You did what you had to do, son." Hearing that validation from someone in the family meant the world to me. I learned through him that the consequences I had set in motion had been swift and severe. My parents had been forced to sell the house, the one I had paid for 8 years, and move into a small rental apartment. The proceeds barely covered Leo's loan and their other debts. My father had taken a part-time job as a security guard. My mother was working full-time at the dental clinic. And Leo was working at a sporting goods store stocking shelves. The universe, it seemed, had a brutal sense of irony. They had gotten their wish. Their golden child, with all his potential, was finally paying the bills. Or at least his own. A year to the day after that fateful Thanksgiving, I was sitting in a restaurant, looking across the table at a woman named Sophie. Her eyes were bright, and she was laughing at a stupid joke I just told. We had met a few months prior through a mutual friend, and the relationship was everything my family life had not been. Easy, supportive, and built on mutual respect. She knew my story, and she never once made me feel guilty for the choices I had made. Family, she'd once told me, is the people who treat you like you matter. My life was unrecognizable from what it had been a year ago. I had officially launched my own tech consulting firm, and it was thriving. I was my own boss, setting my own hours, and working on projects I was passionate about. I had moved into a new, secure building where my family didn't have my address. I was free. That week, I had another call with my Uncle David. We spoke every month or so, catching up. He'd become the quiet, steady father figure I'd always craved. You know, he said casually, I was talking to your cousin Gary the other day. He ran into your Aunt Clara at the store. I braced myself. Oh yeah, David continued. She was complaining, of course, going on about how you destroyed the family. But then she said something interesting. She admitted that for years, whenever your mother would complain about money, Clara would say things like, "Oh, Helen, don't worry. Liam's making a huge salary. He can afford it. It's the least he can do after all you did for him." She was pouring gasoline on the fire the whole time. It was the final, sad piece of the puzzle. Aunt Clara, the seemingly sweet, supportive aunt, had been a secret manipulator, feeding my mother's sense of entitlement, all while smiling to my face. It wasn't a shocking twist anymore. It was just pathetic. I realized I wasn't even angry. I just felt a profound sense of pity for them. A group of people so trapped in their own resentments and delusions that they had to tear someone else down to feel important. I thought about the concept of an inheritance. I once thought it was about money or property passed down. Now I knew the truth. Their real inheritance was a legacy of dysfunction, and I was just lucky I'd managed to refuse it. Later that evening, Sophie and I were walking through a park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, squeezing my hand. I looked at her, at the genuine concern and affection in her eyes. "I was just thinking about how thankful I am," I said. "Getting an early start on Thanksgiving?" she teased. "Something like that," I smiled. "I'm thankful for second chances, for real connections, for building a life that feels like my own. A year ago, I had lost a family, but in the process, I had finally found myself. And I wouldn't have traded it for the world. I was no longer the invisible son, the family ATM, or the chair they expected to hold them up. I was just Liam, and for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. It's strange how life works out. For so long, I believed that family was an unbreakable bond, a sacred obligation you were born into. I thought love meant enduring any amount of pain, any amount of disrespect, because that's just what you do for family. I was wrong. I learned that true family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about reciprocity. It's about the people who see you, who celebrate your victories without jealousy, and who support you without expecting anything in return. It's the family you choose, the one you build. My family is now made up of friends like Mark, who tell me the hard truths, wise relatives like Uncle David, who offer support without judgment, and a partner like Sophie, who loves me for who I am, not for what I can provide. I do sometimes wonder what my parents and Leo are doing. I imagine them in their small rental apartment, the reality of their choices a constant, unwelcome guest. I heard they sent a Christmas card to my old address a month after the incident. There was no apology, just a passive-aggressive note about how the holidays weren't the same and an expectation that I would eventually come crawling back. I never responded. My healing required distance, a clean break from the toxicity that had defined my life for so long. I don't hate them. I don't think I do. What I feel is a deep, abiding sadness for what we could have been, and a profound sense of peace in accepting what we were. Walking away was the hardest thing I ever had to do, but it was also the single greatest act of self-love I have ever committed. It allowed me to stop being a supporting character in their drama and finally become the main character in my own life. The biggest irony is that by disowning me, my father gave me the one thing I had always craved: freedom. The freedom to define my own worth, to build my own happiness, and to create a family that is a safe harbor, not a battlefield. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I will always be grateful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a long and difficult one, but your time means the world to me. I hope this story has touched you in some way. I have one question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your own well-being and a toxic family obligation? Let me know in the comments below. Sharing your own story can be incredibly powerful. And please, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves.